The whisper started the moment she stepped onto the wet asphalt of the police chief's private shooting range. Behind her back they called her a joke. The simple woman named Hannah Park froze at the entrance, her worn sneakers and oversized windbreaker making her stand out among the uniforms and expensive suits. No one bothered hiding their smirks. To them, she was just some random woman who would be lucky to hit the target at all. They had no idea her 3 perfect shots would soon silence them all. Before you watch the complete story, please comment down your country name. Also don't forget to subscribe. Hannah, 31, had quiet eyes and an even quieter manner. She only came because her high school friend Lieutenant Brooke Foster had insisted. "It'll be fun," Foster had promised. "You don't have to shoot. You can just watch or maybe try a few rounds if you feel like it." So Hannah reluctantly agreed, not knowing she was walking into a nest of inflated egos just waiting for someone to mock. At the entrance, a uniformed officer looked her up and down with obvious doubt. "Are you a sponsor's guest?" he asked, his tone making it clear she didn't belong. Hannah shook her head. "Lieutenant Foster invited me," she said softly. The officer glanced across the range, spotted Foster talking with other officers and relaxed slightly. "Fine. Lane assignments are posted near the main console. If you're not shooting, stand behind the partition." His tone said everything. She was a nuisance. Hannah thanked him quietly and moved deeper into the range. The police chief himself stood tall in his perfect uniform, surrounded by deputy chiefs, local politicians and wealthy donors who had paid for the range's fancy new upgrades. The facility boasted a digital scoreboard, adjustable targets, and sensors that measured shots within fractions of an inch. The atmosphere was thick with boasting men comparing guns, bragging about their accuracy, and mocking anyone who missed the bullseye. Hannah could almost taste their arrogance. Lieutenant Foster spotted her and hurried over with an apologetic smile. "Hannah, I'm sorry I didn't greet you. Everything's more hectic than I expected." The chief invited half the department and a bunch of important people. Hannah shrugged. "I'm fine. I'm just here to look around." "Do you want to shoot?" Foster asked. "It's not mandatory." Hannah glanced at the lanes filled with people who clearly took pride in every shot. She rarely showed her skill in public, but something in her wanted to prove herself. "I'll think about it," she answered quietly. As they walked, they passed a group of officers packing up their rifles. One recognized Foster and called out, "Hey Lieutenant, is this your friend? You might want to keep her in the viewing zone. These lanes aren't for amateurs." His companion snickered. Foster glared at him, but Hannah touched her arm gently. She dealt with sneers before. Her face remained calm. Over the intercom, the day's schedule was announced, a demonstration by the chief and top marksman, followed by an open challenge. The scoreboard flickered with placeholders for competitor names. The police chief took center stage with a sleek pistol, charming the crowd with practiced confidence. He fired several shots at 25 yards, each hitting near the target center. The crowd applauded as the scoreboard showed his near-perfect score. Hannah watched from the back, analyzing their stances, recoil control, and technique. She noticed how the scoreboard recorded tiny deviations from the bullseye and how the crowd cheered for anything above 90% accuracy. Meanwhile, several officers kept glancing at Hannah, whispering jokes. "She probably can't handle recoil. She'll drop the gun if she tries to shoot. Must be Foster's pity invite." Each remark stung slightly but not enough to break her composure. After the demonstration ended, the police chief stepped aside with a self-satisfied smile. The scoreboard displayed his final average, 93% accuracy. The next segment began, open lanes for any visitor who wanted to test their skill. The scoreboard reset, and a line formed at the sign-up table. Foster nudged Hannah. "We could sign up if you want. I'd love to see you shoot again. I remember you used to be pretty good in college." Hannah thought about the time she had practiced at an old rural range with her father's rifles, learning to steady her breath until each shot felt like a controlled exhale. Living in the city, she hadn't practiced much lately, but the muscle memory remained. Faced with all the sneers, she felt a spark of defiance. "All right," she said softly. "I'll sign up for one round." The officer in charge, a heavy-set man with a mustache, raised an eyebrow when Hannah approached. "Name?" he asked. She told him and he checked his list. "Lane 6 when your turn comes. Ammo is available at the desk. You comfortable with a standard 9mm?" She nodded. "Sure." "Good luck," he said dismissively, clearly thinking her presence was just a formality. Hannah collected a 9mm from the rental area, checked everything was in order, found ear protection, loaded a small magazine and tried to ignore the curious stares. In lane 5, A burly officer fired rapidly, hitting all over the target. The scoreboard beeped with each shot, showing his mediocre accuracy as he cursed under his breath. In lane 7, a city councilman with designer glasses fired carefully, achieving decent results that earned mild applause. The scoreboard showed the rankings from 70% up to 94%. Chief Morales stood near the top with 93%, just below someone named G. Miller at 94.5%. Finally, Hannah's turn arrived. A hush fell over the nearby area as she stepped into lane 6. The console asked for her name, which she typed in, ignoring the smirks of two men behind her. The scoreboard displayed H. Park, with a blank stats column. She placed the pistol on the small ledge, inhaled slowly and recalled the fundamentals: stance, grip, breath control, trigger discipline. She would have 3 shots, each impact appearing on the scoreboard, which would then calculate her overall rating. Behind her, someone joked, 3 shots, huh? Perfect number for comedic effect. Another added, she'll be lucky if one hits the paper. Hannah tensed slightly, then forced the tension out. If she let them rattle her, it would show in her aim. She took one final breath, lifted the pistol and lined up the sights. A wave of clarity washed over her as she exhaled. The first shot cracked, the recoil jolted her arms lightly and the scoreboard beeped. A collective intake of breath rippled through the watchers. The bullet had landed near dead center. The digital readout showed, shot 1, 0.2 in from center. A handful of observers murmured in surprise. She paused, steadied and fired the second round. Another beep, another near bullseye. A trickle of applause came from those who recognized good marksmanship. Hannah moved methodically, each shot timed with a controlled exhale, each trigger press smooth. By the time she fired her third shot, the range had fallen into stunned silence. The smirks had vanished from the faces of the men behind her. The scoreboard updated, showing her tight grouping and an accuracy hovering around 97%. Her heart pounded, but her hands stayed steady. The final display froze for a moment, processing all data, then showed her total, 97.3%. For half a second no one spoke. Then an astonished ripple coursed through the spectators, punctuated by scattered applause. The scoreboard reorganized its ranking, and Hannah's name slid above all previous top shooters, settling at the very top with that 97.3%. The men who had earlier mocked her stood slack-jawed, their expressions a mix of confusion and embarrassed awe. The police chief's face twitched as he tried to appear gracious while clearly stunned by this blow to his carefully maintained ego. Hannah set the pistol down gently, flicking the safety on, then stepped back. The staff retrieved her target, revealing a tight cluster of 3 holes near dead center. Someone whistled in admiration. Lieutenant Foster rushed up with shining eyes. "Hannah, that was incredible. I had no idea you were still this good." Hannah felt her cheeks warm with the unaccustomed praise. "I guess I got lucky," she mumbled. But Foster shook her head vigorously. "That's not luck. That's skill. You basically outshot half the department." The crowd parted as the police chief stepped forward, trying to maintain his charismatic facade. "Excellent shooting, Mississippi Park," he said, offering a handshake that felt awkwardly stiff. "You must have trained extensively to achieve such results." She shrugged politely. "I practiced a bit when I was younger. I'm just out of practice." The chief forced a hollow laugh. "Well, you've given us a show. Nicely done." Then he stepped away, clearly unhappy about being overshadowed. As the scoreboard continued rotating names and numbers, Hannah's 97.3% remained at the top for all to see. Reactions varied wildly. Some officers approached with genuine congratulations. Others, especially those who had boasted about their own skills, sulked in corners or muttered excuses about the system being calibrated incorrectly. Hannah felt a mixture of relief and discomfort. She hadn't wanted to humiliate anyone, but she couldn't deny the quiet satisfaction of having proven her worth to those who had dismissed her so quickly. The excitement grew when another man, a champion shooter from a nearby county, loudly announced he could beat 97.3%. The crowd gathered to watch as he took the lane next to Hannah's, adjusted his stance and fired with mechanical precision. When his final score appeared, 96.1%, he shook his head in frustration and gave Hannah a grudging look of respect. Word spread quickly that some simple woman had just beaten recognized experts, including the police chief himself. Soon after, a staff member approached Hannah. "Mississippi Park, we'd like to retrieve your target for the record. The chief keeps outstanding targets on display." Hannah was surprised. "Is that normal?" "I don't want to overstep." "Not at all. We do it whenever someone hits above 95%, especially at 25 yards. Impressive. The chief just wants to confirm everything is legitimate. The faint note of skepticism in his voice suggested they might double-check the bullet holes. Hannah shrugged. All right, sure. He left with the target for inspection while the scoreboard continued rotating. After half an hour of attempts, no one came close to Hannah's score. The second best was a local SWAT officer with 95.8%. Later, Hannah was summoned to the chief's office, where he examined her target with barely concealed resentment. These groupings are extraordinary, he said, especially for someone who lacks formal law enforcement or military background. Hannah explained she had practiced when younger, but wasn't a professional. The chief leaned forward. This range is an important part of our department's image. With all respect, you're an unknown who just strolled in and overshadowed everyone, including me. His tone carried clear resentment beneath his civil words. Foster objected, but the chief raised his hand. I'm not accusing Ms. Park of wrongdoing, but a visitor claiming top rank might raise questions. People might suspect tampering. Hannah's eyes widened. Are you suggesting I tampered with the system? The chief held her gaze, then dropped it. I'm merely ensuring everything is above board. He slid the target across the desk. We tested the bullet holes. They match the standard ammo. The scoreboard logs show no tampering. So it appears legitimate. In the uncomfortable silence that followed, Hannah understood the chief felt humiliated that a nobody had surpassed his score. He was trying to save face. Finally, he forced another tight smile. I suppose we can celebrate your achievement, Mississippi Park. My apologies if this seemed distrustful. On the drive home, Hannah felt proud that her 3 perfect shots had broken the aura of invincibility many at the range flaunted. Those men who had sneered discovered their bravado was hollow compared to quiet competence. In the following weeks, stories spread about the unknown woman who outshot the entire police department. Some speculated she must be an undercover agent or an Olympic shooter in disguise. Hannah ignored the gossip, focusing on her normal life as an administrative assistant. When colleagues heard the rumors, they pestered her for details, half expecting it to be a joke. She simply smiled and said, I got lucky with a few shots. They didn't realize those 3 rounds came from years of disciplined practice and natural calm under pressure. Lieutenant Foster, however, enjoyed retelling the story around the precinct, careful not to anger higher-ups but eager to remind certain officers that arrogance was no match for real skill. A few months later, Hannah found herself at a smaller, less official range outside the city, accompanied by officers who genuinely admired her technique. They suggested she become an instructor or consultant for the department. She politely declined, saying she preferred her quiet life. Yet standing on a range with people who valued skill over appearances felt wonderful. No one snickered at her old windbreaker or suspected cheating. They simply respected her mastery. Hannah never returned to the police chief's private range. Foster hinted the chief might be more receptive now, that maybe he'd like to see her in an official capacity. Hannah shook her head. She'd already made her statement with those 3 shots. Let the scoreboard and her target in the chief's office remain as silent reminders that real ability can arrive unannounced, wearing scuffed sneakers and a modest windbreaker, toppling egos that soar too high. Her 3 perfect shots had taught them all that sometimes the most impressive skill comes wrapped in the simplest package, and that pride, when it meets true talent, can be broken with just 3 bullets.